My name is Dorinda Evans. I live just north of Jackson, Mississippi, and I am what is called a dedicated quilter. I've been quilting for about 24 years now and have made over 300 quilts. Many times when the word quilts or quilting is mentioned to folks, it recalls memories of visiting Grandma and going in the room to see the quilting frame suspended from the ceiling drop down for all the neighborhood ladies to gather around and quilt together. But the quilting world has definitely changed since then. Quilting is no longer a country craft or something done in country homes. It is now a $4 billion a year industry. And statistics show that 17% of American households are actually involved in quilting. Quilting, as we know it, is closely tied in with the history of the United States. When early European settlers came over, they brought their quilts from Europe. And as they wore out, they had to be patched with pieces of old clothing. So this is where the term patchwork came from. Fabric was very difficult to get in the early history of the United States because it all had to be shipped over from Europe. But once Americans became more self-sufficient by growing their own cotton and weaving their own textiles, then fabric was more readily available to the pioneer women. Back during the push toward the West, little bits of fabric and design patterns were traded off as women met each other and made friends and then separated again to resettle. The names of these blocks are very reflective of their trip. I would like to show you a few traditional blocks that reflect the history of these pioneer women. In front of me is a quilt called the Americana Sampler that was designed by Fons and Porter for the bicentennial years. This is a sampler quilt because there is one block of many different patterns, and in here you will find some traditional blocks. The name of this block right here is called Broken Dishes. So you can imagine how the pioneer women were dismayed that many of their dishes were broken on the trip. The quilt block we find here is named Shoe Fly. You can imagine the insects they had to deal with on their trip. And this block is a very, very traditional block where you trace the quilter's hand, and the symbolism behind this is hands to work, hearts to God. Memories from home were very important, and so this block with the red flowers and the green stems and leaves is called Carolina Lily. Animal tracks often became quilt patterns. The name of this one is called the Bear Paw. Located here is a very traditional log cabin block. In a log cabin block, the centers are traditionally red or yellow to symbolize the hearth or the fireplace in their new log home. The lighter colored logs on one side of the block stand for the good times in life, and the darker strips of fabric on the opposite side stand for those times where life was just a little bit harder. I would like to show you the evolution of a log cabin block from traditional to quite contemporary. This quilt from the 1880s has been passed down through the generations into our family. You can see the use of very thick suiting type fabrics and brocades, but the quilter has put these in a log cabin setting. Here you see the log cabin block with the traditional red fireplace, light logs, and dark logs. This quilter was also just a little bit beyond her time because she did change this log in this position to add more of a square effect. This miniature log cabin quilt, there are 12 blocks here in this quilt, and you see that the little red center is there. There are light logs on one side, dark on the other. When you turn these blocks a certain direction, you get the setting that they call field and furrows, because it looks like the hills and valleys of a freshly plowed field. The quilt behind me was made in 1999 out of my scraps. I began with a log cabin block, but did not treat it very traditionally. The center of the quilt is blocks that are half red and half orange. And as you move out, each row changes colors. You'll see that this row is orange and yellow. These blocks are yellow-green, green to blue, blue to purple, and then when you get toward the edges of the quilt, the order reverses. These log cabin blocks are placed in what is called a barn raising setting, which looks like a diamond from a distance. This quilt was actually published in the Great American Quilt series as a non-traditional use of a traditional pattern. The fabric behind me is batik. It has been imported from Indonesia. It is a particularly fine quality of cotton. The log cabin is the block that this quilt is based on, but as you can see, instead of the small hearth center, I have put pinwheels. This adds a lot of motion to the quilt. You can see here that the dark strips are weaving their way across the quilt, over and under, as the light and dark sides of the log cabin are turned.